Hey everybody, and welcome to ITOpsTalks, all things hybrid. My name is Sarah Lean, and I'm joined by my teammate Pamela Smith. How are you doing?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Sarah. I am a little cold. It's been snowing for about 2 days now. So eventually I'm going to have to shovel out, but I'm glad we are all virtual for our all things hybrid talk today.
Yes, I am super excited about this event. We have all been planning this for a few months. You've seen us all talk about it, and we're going to be talking about more about the event. But first of all, Pamela, we've got some housekeeping to do. Could you take the audience through the housekeeping bits and bobs that we need to do, first of all?
Sure, because everybody loves housekeeping, and we have to be adults here. So, yes, that is our team slide, as everyone. So everyone that's on our team here, our team lead is Rick. We've got Anthony, Oren, Pierre, myself. We've got Sarah, Sonia, and Thomas, and we are the team that talks things operations, hybrid, and we are bringing the show to you today. Sorry, I have a little tongue twister there. Oh, there we go. Okay, this is the housekeeping slide. Okay, so the code of conduct. This is where we're all adults here, everyone. We're all friends. We don't, well, for the most part, we're all virtual friends too. But let's be adults, be aware of others, and also let's be respectful and welcoming to everyone that's here and all the new attendees as well. And also understand that everyone has differences of opinions, which is totally okay. And always be open to different viewpoints because you never know what you are going to learn. But most importantly, let's be respectful of one another.
Excellent. Yes, we're looking forward to this event. So everybody pitch in with your chats and comments on wherever you're watching us. And yes, today's event is something a little different that the team have been putting together for the last couple of months. And I think this has come from audience feedback, this event that we've been doing. And people have been telling us that they are looking forward to deep dive content. They're wanting things that are at a level 300 or 400, and they want longer sessions. They want those sessions that actually go deep down and talk about the technologies in more depth. But with these virtual events that we're all having to go through, people are struggling to try and fit them into their schedule and schedule in their work and maybe homeschooling and all the different things that they're doing. So people are missing out on virtual events where you have to appear at maybe 10 a.m. for that session. And so what we're doing is we're taking on board all of that different audience feedback, and we've launched something different today. So that's what our event is all about. We're launching something very different for our audience based on the audience feedback. Have I missed anything, Pamela, about what we're trying to achieve with this event today?
Community, right? The people, you guys, everyone that's watching. How can you be involved and feel part of the event? Well, we have a Discord server, which you can get to at aka.ms/ITOpsTalk-Discord. Sorry, I was practicing that one because it is a long one. But yeah, join us on our Discord server where there are individual rooms for each session that you can join. You can comment, ask questions, and our whole team's going to be there. We also have potential partners, friends of the community. Everyone's going to be there chatting along, following along. But you can also, watch us on YouTube and learn TV as well. And if you have comments, comment, join, talk about it, talk to us. We are listening. We're looking for, we're looking at comments. We've got people on the line here. Yeah, just waiting for you guys to chit chat with us. So, if you're watching, follow along, talk to us, feed those comments. We're listening.
Yes, absolutely. And I know we've got several watch parties actually happening right now. People are kind of joining as a community to watch what's happening at our event and various different watch parties. So thank you to everybody and hello to all the watch parties. I hope you're having fun. And like Pamela said, please comment. We want to have conversations with you. So wherever you're watching, drop a comment. We have people watching. We're also monitoring Twitter. So if you use the hashtag AZOps, you can join in the conversation there as well. We're also quickly running a Clyde Skills challenge in the background. And this is something that you can do offline in your own time, where you can not only learn something as you go through this Cloud Skills challenge, you actually have the opportunity to win some time with Jeff Woolsey, who is the principal program manager. And you might have heard of him around technologies like Windows Server and Hybrid and Azure Stack HCI. So if you have a look at the information that's on screen, go and have a go at the Cloud Skills challenge. You can win some time with Jeff, and you can even win some time with one of us as well, some one-on-one time. So not only do you get to learn something, but you also get to spend some time with some cool people as well as a result of that. Now, what we're trying to do today, this morning, if you're watching live right now, is we have a fantastic keynote from our CTO and Technical Fellow of Azure, Mark Russinovich. Mark Russinovich is somebody I always love seeing speak. I remember queuing up at in-person events trying to watch and get Mark to be in his sessions, and his sessions are always really engaging, and I've always learned something. I think we've probably all got some cool stories about watching Mark's keynotes. And Mark's keynote is something today that he's never delivered before. He's talking all about hybrid. And yeah, I'm super excited to look forward to this keynote. Pumla, what do you think about this keynote? Are you looking forward to it?
Yes, fangirling right now. Total fangirling.
Awesome.
I too stood in line to watch him talk. So it is absolutely amazing that he is keynoting our little project that we're doing right now. I'm totally excited for it, especially to hear him talk about hybrid, because hybrid is, it is the world right now, right? I mean, look at us, what we're doing now. It's the way enterprises are working, and it's also the way, small mom pop shops are working. So I'm really excited to hear what he has to say.
Absolutely. And after the keynote today, Mark is actually going to be here live answering your questions. So please do watch the keynote and fire off questions, because Mark himself will be here live after the keynote to answer those questions. So again, another great opportunity to ask him some questions and take advantage of his, his generosity in helping support this event. Now, I'm getting kind of noises in my ear telling me that we should be transitioning to the keynote. So again, thank you to everybody for supporting us. We are super excited to launch this event, and we're looking forward to the keynote. And remember, questions, we want to interact with you all. So make sure you're paying attention and ask us some questions. So yeah, let's transition over to the keynote.
Hi, welcome to Microsoft Azure Hybrid Solutions. My name is Mark Russinovich. I'm Chief Technology Officer and Technical Fellow for Microsoft Azure. So to understand Azure's hybrid solutions, it's important to understand how that fits in the overall context of Azure. And you might think of Azure as cloud and hyperscale public cloud regions. And of course, that is where Azure started, and that is where you're going to get the most value and scalability. However, Azure spans this entire spectrum that you see here, all the way down to tiny devices that fit in things like coffee machines that are integrated with Azure, and many points in between. We have Azure Edge Zones, for example, and then for your deploying Azure services and capabilities in your own data center, we've got Azure Private Edge Zones, and we also have Azure Stack Hub. Azure Stack Hub being a fully cloud consistent version of Azure that can even run disconnected from the public cloud and as small as 4 hyperconverged servers in your own data center. It also includes Azure Stack HCI, Azure Stack Hyperconverged Infrastructure, which also runs in your own hardware, in your own data centers. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then finally, it includes Azure IoT devices, which are Azure IoT SDKs that can be installed in Raspberry Pis and other IoT class devices that integrate up into Azure's IoT solutions and allow you to stream data, send control messages, and deploy applications onto those class of devices. When we talk about Azure's hybrid solutions, there's a whole spectrum of them beyond just the hardware integrations that I've talked about. For example, at the bottom, Microsoft's always been focused on integrating your own on-premises capabilities with Azure and either bringing value from Azure down to your on-premises data centers or integrating your on-premises data centers and applications with Azure itself. So we've got support for management that I'll talk more about in a little bit later. We've got support for security and identity For example, Azure Active Directory has ways for you to do single sign-on from your own on-premises Active Directory deployment into cloud services, whether they're Azure's cloud services, Microsoft's in general, or even third-party SaaS and PaaS offerings. Security hybrid has been a focus of ours from the start. So Azure Security Center lets you deploy Azure security agents on your own infrastructure and then get deep insights out of that in Azure's and also policy applications and compliance reports in Azure Security Center. We've also got support for hybrid application and data services. So SQL, for example, has support for backing up to public Azure. Windows Server supports backup to public Azure. We also have been a big focus on dev tools and DevOps, which are also focused not just on developing applications for Azure's public cloud, but being able to develop applications regardless of where they get deployed, including your own data center. There's a set of offerings that are specific to Azure and integrations with Azure. And I already talked a little bit about Azure Stack with Azure Stack Hub and Azure Stack HCI. We also have made a big investment in a relatively new offering we announced about a year ago called Azure Arc. What Azure Arc does is recognize that you've got on-premises applications and infrastructure that you might want to bring Azure capabilities to. And those Azure capabilities include things like monitoring, management, including applying policies, role-based access control, and control plane operations, where you can leverage Azure's APIs and Azure's portal to directly interact with those on-premises resources. We have several initial offerings in the Azure Arc category, including Azure Arc for Server, where you can take servers and register them with Azure and get the ability to deploy extensions and agents into them, monitor them, role-based access control of access to them. Kubernetes support for Azure Arc, where you can register your on-premises Kubernetes clusters with Azure, and again, take advantage of all those capabilities. And Azure big data clusters, which are SQL, Postgres, that run on top of Kubernetes deployments on premises. These initial offerings are going to expand, but the idea here you can see is I've got an existing virtual machine. It's sitting here on premises. I'd like to bring Azure management and monitoring and security capabilities to that virtual machine, and that's what Azure Arc lets you do. And I'm going to focus in this presentation on highlighting some of the ways that Azure Arc lets you do that and some of the power that it brings. And then finally, the category of IoT is a big focus of ours. Intelligent cloud, intelligent edge, bringing machine learning out to the edge, dealing with scenarios where latency and bandwidth or data sovereignty might prevent you from putting a workload or putting that data up in the public cloud. It has to be close to the endpoint, sitting in the environment, and so that is a focus of our IoT solutions. Like I said, I'm going to focus here on Azure Stack HCI and Azure Arc. And the reason that I'm focusing here is because these are very easy ways for you as an enterprise operator to be able to take advantage of Azure with minimal effort and take it and leverage its capabilities in place. So it's kind of the easiest way. That one of the ways to adopt the cloud is, of course, to do cloud migrations, lift and shift your applications, modernize your applications, deploy them to the cloud. Those are typically longer journeys requiring deep analysis of your workloads and planning for architectures and then planning for those movements. In the case of Azure Stack HCI, it is kind of easy to adopt, very quickly to adopt capabilities from the public cloud. So Azure Stack HCI, you can see in here, is on premises. So you bring your own server hardware, your own hyperconverged servers from the OEMs that you traditionally will work with, and it provides a number of capabilities to that infrastructure. It includes things like security monitoring. It includes the ability for you to do backups of those virtual machines to the public cloud and take advantage of that cheap, highly reliable, highly available public cloud storage to back up your own on-premises infrastructure. It includes support for update management and orchestration of updates across that infrastructure. And it also includes the ability for you to do monitoring, and that monitoring is for health analytics monitoring as well as for security monitoring of that infrastructure. All of that is what Azure Stack HCI brings to the table by leveraging capabilities in public Azure. So Azure Stack HCI may be something you're familiar with because you've been following our data center evolution for several years, or it might be something new to you. And regardless, you might be wondering, how does that relate to our Windows Server strategy? So what I'm going to do is explain how they're similar and how their focus is a little bit different. So first, we're investing heavily in both of them. Azure Stack HCI is our focus, relatively new. We've got a roadmap of awesome new releases. Windows Server is something we've been working on for decades, and we continue to evolve and mature it and enhance it with new cloud native capabilities. But the way that they're different now is Azure Stack HCI is really focused on being a great virtualization host or a great virtualization platform, whereas Windows Server is focused on being an awesome guest, meaning where you're going to be actually running your workload, leveraging the capabilities of Windows Server as a runtime, either in a virtual machine or on top of a bare metal server. And that means that Azure Stack HCI is the future of Hyper-V virtualization and our software-defined data center roadmap. So things like software-defined networking and software-defined storage and bringing that to your own on-premises infrastructure, that is Azure Stack HCI. Whereas Windows Server is going to continue to evolve and fulfill its capabilities of delivering great Windows Server roles support, including things for like DNS, DHCP, Active Directory, and file services and web serving. So whereas Azure Stack HCI is a great virtualization host aimed at supporting any type of virtual machine operating system, any type of guest, whether it's Windows Server or any of the flavors of Linux that it's supported. Windows Server, of course, is going to be a great platform for running Windows apps as well on top of it, like SQL Server. So you can think of one as virtual machines, the other one is Windows Server apps and roles. And this is where they're a little bit similar and also a little bit different because Azure Stack HCI is designed to run on your own infrastructure in your own data centers. You can think of Azure Stack HCI as being the on-premises implementation for your own enterprise of infrastructure, whereas in public Azure, we've got a kind of a version of Azure Stack HCI with software-defined data centers running in public Azure data centers. Windows Server, though, is designed to run anywhere, whether it's in your own hardware, on Azure Stack HCI and bare metal servers in your own data centers, in public Azure or in other clouds as well. Now, if we take a look at the Azure Stack HCI architecture, you can see at the bottom we've got a hardware ecosystem, and these are going to be all of the OEMs that you purchase your hardware through, supported by Azure Stack HCI. On top of that, we've got the Azure Stack HCI operating system, which is a distributed operating system that supports software-defined data center like I talked about, and on a per node or per server basis, that's where you're going to see Hyper-V at the foundation of it. On top of that, you've got your Windows or Linux virtual machines, as well as support for AKS on Azure Stack HCI. And this is our bringing compatible Azure Kubernetes service that we've got in Azure down to your own infrastructure so you can run your Kubernetes workloads on top of Azure Stack HCI with integrations and optimization with Azure Stack HCI's infrastructure. Then on top of that layer, you're going to have your virtual apps that run in virtual machines. You're going to have cloud native apps that run on top of Kubernetes. And you're also going to have Arc-enabled data services, and I'll talk about that in a little bit later. But Arc-enabled data services, again, SQL and Postgres, those are going to be running on top of Kubernetes, whether it's AKS on Azure Stack HCI or other Kubernetes distributions. And then finally on top, we've got your runtimes and other applications that you're going to build on top of this foundational layer. You can see over on the right side of the architecture diagram that we have Azure Arc, and I already talked about Arc-enabled data services. I also, going back, talked about how Azure Arc can be enabled on your virtual machines. So this is where you would register those virtual machines, Windows or Linux virtual machines with Azure Arc, and then get Arc management, monitoring, and security capabilities applied to them. But Azure Arc also deeply integrates with Azure Stack HCI itself. And to demonstrate that, why don't we go take a look at how we can register a file share in Azure Stack HCI and have that be managed and accessible through Azure. So here you can see my dashboard in Windows Admin Center. And what I'm taking a look at here is the Azure connection, the status of my servers, and the status of my drives. What I'm going to do to demonstrate some of the capabilities of Windows Admin Center on top of Azure Stack HCI is go create a new file share and show you just how easy it is to create a very resilient file share, all from this UX, and to demonstrate that kind of resiliency you get right out of the Azure Stack HCI infrastructure. So first, let's go create a volume. I call this volume here demo. volume, and we want it to be a two-way mirror so that it can be highly resilient in the face of any particular server failure. We're going to create that volume as a virtual size of 20 gigabytes, and you can see that that's the amount of space we actually require is double that because it is a mirror. And then we create. And this is being created right on top of that Azure Stack HCI storage pool that we've registered. Like I mentioned, we want to be able to share out that volume to our enterprise users. And so the next thing we're going to do is to go create a file share on top of it. And here you can see that we're going to select the volume that I just created, call this demo share, and create that share. Skip through the defaults here and create it. And you can see here we've got it created, so we can immediately go open that share now. And you can see it's empty. Go back to Windows Admin Center. You can also explore the share from there. And this is actually all of the Azure Stack HCI's shares or volumes. And here you can see I've clicked open the demo volume I created and access the demo share that's registered on that top volume. I'm going to upload some files directly in Windows Admin Center to that share on that volume. And then we've finished the upload. I can go back into Explorer on that share and double click that, and you can see we've got a bunch of client records inside a zip file now. Now I've just uploaded this, and the active node on that mirror is node 1. So to demonstrate the resiliency that I've just gotten out of the box here, I'm going to shut down node 1 on this Azure Stack HCI infrastructure. Shut it down, and we go back into Explorer in Windows Admin Center, and you can see that here we are on node 2, which is still up and active. If I go to the file share there, we're going to find that our files on that share were synced. And so even though, obviously, despite the fact that we've had a major failure here of a node, because that was a two-way mirror on top of Azure Stack HCI, completely transparent to those end users that were interacting with the share. So that's a quick look at Azure Stack HCI and some of the capabilities you get out of Azure Stack HCI managing your infrastructure and presenting capabilities and services on top of it, including support for creating highly resilient volumes and file shares on top of those volumes. Now let's talk about how to leverage the power of Azure on top of your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure. And that's where we get back into Azure Arc. And I've talked about Azure Arc for servers, registering your virtual machines or your bare metal servers with Azure, which allows you to access them through the Azure portal, through the Azure CLI, and get those benefits of policy, security, and monitoring on top of them. Azure Arc for Kubernetes, rather, which is registering your Kubernetes clusters. And finally, Azure Data Services on Azure Arc, where you can take your big data clusters and run them on premises on your own infrastructure. So here's a deeper look at the architecture of Azure Arc. At the bottom, you've got resource-specific tools, like your Kubernetes native tools, your server admin tools, your Git repo, your other tools that are going to be leveraging in your on-premises infrastructure, regardless of whether you connect them up to Azure Arc or not. At the very top, you've got management experiences and management services that apply to Azure Arc. Like I mentioned, monitoring, role-based access control, insights into the security policies that you've got, and insights into the monitoring that is being generated by what's called Azure Resource Manager, which is the universal control plane to Azure. And let me stop here for a second and talk a little bit about Azure Resource Manager, because understanding Azure Resource Manager, I think, will really drive home a deeper understanding of Azure Arc. ARM, Azure Resource Manager, is the universal control plane for all of Azure. All of Azure's infrastructure and platform as a service offerings plug in to ARM for their control planes. What that means is that ARM is effectively the front door for Azure. And as the front door, it can provide uniform capabilities across all of these services. Those uniform capabilities are the ones I've been talking about. Role-based access control. So there's a common way to apply role-based access control across all of Azure services because they all plug into ARM. Similarly, for monitoring on that control plane, you get that right out of Azure Resource Manager because all of its control plane operations for all Azure services go through ARM. ARM logs all that to an activity log that you can then go look at for security insights and for business and service health insights. And then policy is something else you can apply, and organization of your inventory. So grouping collections of resources that are instantiated through Azure ARM is possible through the use of Azure Policy and Azure Management Groups, where you can attach policy to groups of resources that have similar purpose and require similar compliance and security rules. And governance and compliance, of course, is a key part of that. Now, when you talk about Azure Arc for virtual and physical servers, that means installing an Azure Arc agent inside that virtual server that is, or physical server that's registered with ARM through the Arc RP or resource provider. And now what that does is light up those servers into ARM, and you get those ARM capabilities. Similarly for Kubernetes clusters, once you register that Kubernetes cluster after you install the Arc agent for Kubernetes in that cluster, register it with Azure Arc. At that point, it shows up now as a Kubernetes cluster through Azure Arc in Azure's portal and Azure's command lines, and now as part of Azure's control plane. And the same thing happens for Azure Arc Data Manager, which registers your SQL or your PostgreSDB clusters with Azure Arc, again giving you those same capabilities up into Azure's portal. And you can see where this is going. Really, the Azure Arc agent, by registering a resource with Azure ARM and providing that control plane plugin, you automatically get all of the capabilities, all of the richness, support for templates, support for governance, support for security insights on top of Azure Security Center, on top of Azure Sentinel, which I'll talk about a little bit later, just by virtue of plugging in. So no easier way to get all of these capabilities and consistency with everything else you're doing in Azure by registering your resources with Azure Arc. So let's take a look at Azure Arc in action on top of Azure Stack HCI infrastructure. So here I'm back in Windows Admin Center. Now this time, instead of looking at volumes, I'm going to take a look at virtual machines. And so here we're going to go to the virtual machines menu. And you can see that I've got a couple of them. And I've got one here in the stop state, this Windows Server 2019 virtual machine. Let's start that virtual machine by powering it on. And then we're going to connect to it. And you're going to see that this is a fresh virtual machine. We've got the Server Manager dashboard that comes up by default on this, brand new, clean image. Now, when I go to Microsoft Azure's portal, you can see I just did a refresh. And because we had that Arc agent installed and registered that virtual machine with Azure, it shows right up here in the Azure portal. And it shows right up here with a bunch of different capabilities offered up to me, like security, monitoring, policies, those things I've been talking about, for me to readily access right here. One of the things I mentioned, which is a really powerful capability that is consistent with public Azure, is the ability to install agents into those virtual machines. And what I'm doing here is installing the Microsoft Log Analytics agent, which is Microsoft's monitoring agent, which we install into public Azure virtual machines, here onto my on-premises virtual machine. And you can see I've registered it with my Log Analytics workspace. And what that means is that now I'm going to start getting logs automatically from that Windows Server machine, the event logs, sent up into Azure for me to be able to look at. You can also see that I'm able to connect and manage that virtual machine right here from the Azure portal. So I'm connecting through RDP back to my on-premises infrastructure into that virtual machine. And when I do Control-Alt-Delete and pull up Task Manager, you can see that I've installed that monitor agent, and it in fact is already in there in that virtual machine and running, and now collecting data that's being sent up to Azure for us to be able to mine in ways for security analytics as well as health for that virtual machine. So we've just seen me create a volume on top of Azure Stack HCI, look at a virtual machine on Azure Stack HCI, install the Azure Arc agent so that I could see it up in the Azure portal and start managing it and getting the capabilities through ARM that I talked about. We actually used one of the really cool capabilities for Azure Arc for servers, which is installing extensions into it. And the extension I installed into that virtual machine was the Azure monitoring agent, the same agent we apply everywhere in Azure. Now that I've done that, I've got this foundation on which I can start to provide really cool value-added services on top and capabilities on top of that. And one of them is security insights. I've already talked about Azure Security Center, and one of the things that we get right off the bat when we've registered one of those servers with Arc is the ability for that server to show up in Azure Security Center and for me to be able to see, is that server patched? What kind of vulnerabilities are exposed on that server? But one of the other things I get now with the log agent in there is the ability to do deep security analytics on top of what's coming out of that virtual machine, in the same way that I would do across my entire Azure portfolio. And that is through a service that we've got called Azure Sentinel, which you can think of as next-gen XDR or a SIEM in the cloud, SIEM as a service. And it's really taken off because of its incredibly powerful capabilities and ability to join lots of different data sources together so that you don't have islands of security information. You've got basically a lake of security information. And that is really important when it comes to security, because so many times a security threat isn't isolated to a particular resource, but actually spans resources. If we see threat actors doing lateral movements, and what they're doing on a virtual machine relates to what they've done on your network, what they've done in your identity system. And with all of these data sources being aggregatable into Azure Sentinel, now you can get insights and visibility across all of those different areas where the threat actor's acting. This slide takes you a little bit deeper into the architecture for Azure Sentinel. And you can see, like I said, all of these different data sources. Your on-premises SIEM can pump data right into Azure Sentinel. We've got Microsoft Threat Intelligence, which we're providing our own information into Azure Sentinel, and I'll talk about how we use that in a second. You can get data from other public clouds and pump that into Azure Sentinel. All of these different data sources, because it's so extensible, really data can come from anywhere. And of course, we've got built-in connectors for existing Azure resources. Azure Active Directory, Azure ARM activity logs, all can be dumped into Azure Sentinel. And at that point, with log analytics, for you to be able to do your own queries across that entire data set of security signals, be able to say, where have I seen logins from this particular user across which assets and at what times? To having analytics rules, heuristics, or even machine learning algorithms surface things up as incidents. So where anomalies here and there are low fidelity signals, having intelligence combine these things together and surface things up as an incident where we have a high fidelity probability that we've got a threat actor working across those resources that Sentinel has access and visibility into. It also has supports for Jupyter notebooks. And so this is something that is becoming more popular for security analysts, is to be able to sit with a Jupyter notebook and run Python commands atop that database of security signals to be able to ad hoc get insights and even come up with workbooks and solutions which include automation, where you can have direct automated responses to particular kinds of activity. So once you've done an analytics on a particular threat, for example, and you see that a threat actor is operating in a particular way, and you have a mitigation in place, a mitigation which requires a number of steps and operations on your infrastructure, at that point you can automate that with the workbook and have that automatically run. Now, when that incident fires, the mitigation kicks into place. Or alerts go out to security operators. And then all of this, of course, relates to the ability to hunt. So one of the things that Azure Sentinel also does is present that security information up in a graphical form that allows you to see the relationship between different objects that have events being emitted for them, and also track security incidents and those anomalies and understand the incidents from a graph perspective that even spans resources across different assets. So to see Azure Sentinel in action and the kind of value that it can provide on top of the layers that I've been building up here, Azure Stack HCI, next Azure Arc, let's go take a look at Sentinel looking at our virtual machine. So here we are back in Windows Admin Center, and you can see here that when I take a look at the servers, we've got 2 servers. These are Node 1 and Node 2 in our Azure Stack HCI cluster. And when I take a look, you can see that we've got them registered with Azure and Log Analytics agent injected into them, pumping data into our Azure Sentinel workspace here. And you can see now that I've got that data flowing, that we can see events and alerts over time. You can see that I did have an alert because I was doing some testing on this. And we've got a map down at the bottom, which if there'd been a recent alert, we would have seen exactly where in the US, based off of IP address location, that alert came from. I mentioned the ability to plug in lots of different data sources into Azure Sentinel. You can see here the list of connectors that you could register. And I'm registering Azure Activity Log, which is the ARM logs, so that they start flowing into my Azure Sentinel workspace. And so I'm doing that connection right here. And that is an example of a first-party integration for Azure Sentinel. But one of the value propositions of Sentinel is it's not just Azure, it's also Microsoft services as well as many third-party services. As SIMs, you see Windows Firewall there, you can see syslog there, you can see lots of different vendors have their offerings integrated with Azure Sentinel through these connectors. And so we can have, like I said, a security lake, a security data lake with Azure Sentinel. Now to show you the integration with our on-premises Azure Stack HCI deployment here that I've got Arc enabled, I'm going to, after doing much work to force Windows to let me do this because Windows Defender is pretty good at detecting Mimikatz, installing Mimikatz on this server. Mimikatz is a notorious hacker tool for dumping credentials out of the local security authority, the local credential database on a Windows Server system, which allows an attacker to get the credential and then to perform lateral movements across your network. So a very dangerous tool if it's allowed to execute, and one that you certainly, if it executes or even attempts to execute on one of your servers, you're going to want to know. And you can see here, because we integrated with Azure Sentinel and Log Analytics, we immediately got an alert, a high priority alert with a high fidelity signal, which is actually an incident based off of 4 discrete events that are Mimikatz running on that. And you can see that we have this as an unresolved event. You can see that it's high severity. We can change classification of this for future reference and executions of the same incident. We also can set bookmarks on this. We can track the entities, and we can set up workbooks in response. So for example, we could have a script that goes in, does a mitigation, like deletes Mimikatz, or performs some other mitigation, like restores Windows Defender if it's been disabled on that server, automatically execute. So you've seen here in just a short time, I took an Azure Stack HCI cluster. I was able to show you how Azure Stack HCI lets you manage that infrastructure very easily and create highly available, highly reliable services on top of the software-defined data center technologies that are part of Azure Stack HCI. Then I showed you how to Arc enable your infrastructure and how once you've Arc enabled it, a lot of other capabilities can come on top of it, including one of the key ones, which is security insights through Azure Sentinel. Again, very easy, low-touch ways for you to start taking advantage of Microsoft's and Azure's hybrid capabilities for your on-premises infrastructure, right where you are, without having to go perform complex architecture migration plans, without having to worry about where your data is, but immediately getting value out of those kinds of integrations. And so that just gives you a flavor for what we hope to share with you at this Hybrid IT Ops event. And you can see a bunch of the other sessions that we've got here that go deeper into the things that I've been talking about, as well as talk about other aspects of our Azure hybrid offerings that I didn't have an opportunity to share with you But again, wanted to get you excited about what you've got available to you very quickly and easily so that you can become a hero adopting cloud technologies for helping you get your jobs done in your own on-premises data centers. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the event.
Wow, that was amazing. And this is something that Mark Russinovich created just for ITOpsTalks. So it was brand new content. Thank you for joining us. My name is Anthony Bartolo. I'm here with Thomas Maher. Thomas, what did you think of the keynote?
Oh, I really loved it. I mean, obviously you have to love when Mark speaks, right? He always brings up very interesting topics, and we saw it in the chat. It was like very important actually, and very interesting also to ask questions and basically pick his brain afterwards. And so I would have a ton of questions. Unfortunately, I'm not the person who is allowed to ask the questions, but I really, really liked the keynote. It was very much about the hybrid overall picture and showed like some of the use cases. And I think especially at the end where he brought in Azure Sentinel, I think that was pretty cool. What did you think about it?
I think it was awesome. I think, like I said, it was a brand new talk from Mark. He really honed in on the questions that were coming in for our audience prior to the event in regards to hybrid and on-premises and what its placement is inside of a hybrid architecture. And what I loved about it is that he showed real-world examples. Did you catch that Mimikatz hack example at the end? That was insane. Like it was, awesome to see a real-world implementation of, Azure Sentinel in the field, monitoring for your on-premises and in-cloud implementation. Can you give us a quick run on the Azure Arc piece? Because I thought that was fascinating too, as to how quickly you can actually connect up all your on-premises architecture.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Azure Arc piece obviously is very dear to my heart, and I obviously do a lot of work on it. But so I loved when he explained how it actually, we take Azure and use it as a control plane. And actually we then allow us to use resources or connect resources which are outside of Azure to that control plane. And we have some sessions on the security piece. I know you did some great stuff there. We also have something on Azure Arc, and there it really goes into the deep technology, how it actually works. It's not just like that we basically show up as you install an agent and then it shows up in Azure as the name or something. It really becomes an Azure resource. It really becomes an object in Azure, in the Azure Resource Manager. And Mark spent a lot of time explaining the Azure Resource Manager and how great it is to actually work with that in there. Now, I really love that. Also, obviously, a lot of Azure Stack HCI stuff, which we got a ton of questions around, and a lot of people seem to be very excited about it.
Oh yeah, and that's it. Just it, right? Azure Stack HCI, you're extending your cloud onto your on-premises. You have that seamless interaction of services that are made available to you. You still have the ability to ensure that data resides on-premises based on certifications or ISO standards that you have to adhere to. Again, it was so amazing to see him go cover the full gamut of Azure solutions, specifically in a hybrid cloud. Even touched on IoT. So that I immediately lit up when I saw that, because I've been talking about it for a while. Is IoT is the next great hybrid plane that IT professionals need to be taking a look into. We actually captured a couple questions, and keep the questions coming in. I know they're coming in on YouTube right now. They're also coming in on Reddit. They're coming in on Twitter. They're coming in on the Learn TV mechanism as well. We actually had a couple questions come in on IoT because the organizations that are asking are saying, well, IoT has been traditionally developer focused and front facing. Should IT be involved? And 100% yes. And it's something where Mark touched on the seamlessness of your hybrid deployment incorporates all data points. It incorporates all endpoints specific to your organization's needs. And because of this, IoT is a part of that, and it's also the responsibility of the IT professional in its inclusion in a hybrid cloud, and to ensure that the governance over these devices is also included in the data that they capture. So beneficial as to how that's even, that information is fed into Sentinel for detection of, is there an attack occurring on the touch point of the device. And I love that he goes to that in a real world scenario piece, that it's that whole aspect of covering the entire cloud. It's not just a specific aspect of it, and it's seamless if it's on premises or in cloud.
Absolutely. I just love that you bring back the IoT part, because I just remember one of his first slides he actually showed was like our solution part, right? Like we have from IoT, like for very small edge solutions, over Azure Stack, the Azure Stack portfolio of all these different devices, Azure Stack HCI, Azure Stack Hub, Azure Stack Edge, and then going even further with Azure Edge Zones, where you can actually we bring more Azure even to different locations where we don't have, for example, Azure regions, up to all, obviously, then to the real Azure regions. And then I think that is also a very great picture if you show that to someone to explain a little bit, like what Azure, what hybrid means when it comes to Azure, right? Many times I get asked like, okay, you have this new hybrid product. Does this now replace the other one? Like, for example, we had like questions when Azure Arc came out, like, is that replacing Azure Stack? And then the answer is no, right? We see like that our customers need to have different solutions, and they need to not every customer needs exactly the same hybrid solution. Everywhere is in a different part. Everyone works differently. Everyone has different needs. So with that, it's really important that we offer the right solution. So some of people obviously use Azure Arc. They use the Azure Arc control plane. Then some probably use Azure Arc to actually deploy Azure services like Azure SQL in their data centers. Some people use, for example, Azure Stack HCI, and some people use all of it. So that I really think is awesome. And again, we have a ton of different things there in Azure. What did you think about, I mean, you're a security guy. And again, you mentioned already the Sentinel part. I know that you also have a couple of sessions coming up. What did you think of Mark's security part there?
So the best thing of this is the seamlessness of securing your data. Hackers don't care if your data is on premises or in cloud, right? Hackers want to gain access to your data from any point that they try to attack, and that attack vector doesn't care on premise, in cloud. I just want access to your data. I love that, the whole aspect of how the on-premises architecture is included into your solution easily through Arc. And that inclusion then funnels in that information from your log analytics, on-premises implementation, right up into the cloud for digestion through Azure Security Center for reporting, and for remediation through Azure Sentinel. The piece to this, and this is the stuff that will be covered, with Sarah Young, and we go through, separating the differences between Security Center and Sentinel, but it's described as a holistic security vector plane. It's not a secure this and it's separate. It's the one pane of glass that governs over your entire architecture, regardless if it's on premises and in cloud. And yes, there was ways to connect your on-premises implementation prior to, in regards to manually adding on these servers into your security spec. But now with Azure Arc and that seamlessness, and you're including that architecture, immediately funneling it right through, it digests right into Sentinel for an analysis. It's such a huge advantage, and such a much more simple implementation of security without putting down the walls of security, making sure that your architecture as a whole is secure.
Yeah, I think you cut a very good point there. And that was also what Mark was showing when he went through the list of connectors in Azure Sentinel. You see, it's not just Azure, or it's not just Microsoft products on-prem or what. It's also a lot of third parties, because I think one thing you just said is really true. It's you need to have this view about everything, right? It's not about you cannot just have one thing covered and the other thing don't. Security and also obviously management is important for the whole scenario. And then what I also realized is it's great that you actually see these alerts in Sentinel and everything coming up. But what he didn't show, and that is the part where I like, because now people see this and they say, I want to have this. What he didn't show is how easy it actually is to set this up, right? You asked me about Azure Arc, and I would also extend that to Windows Admin Center. It's super easy to onboard these services. It's sometimes it's just a press of a button. You probably need to select some information like resource groups and subscriptions you want to use, and then basically here you go, and you can easily onboard hybrid services. And that was also something I captured from the chat on YouTube. There was Nuno, a good friend of ours, all of us. He basically said he loves how Windows Admin Center is like the center of operations and really helps to onboard these different hybrid cloud components to your on-premises environment and how you actually can manage your environment. And so I completely agree with that.
Now, speaking of questions, if you have a question for Mark Russinovich, we're going to be jumping in about 9 minutes time to talk to Mark directly in terms of the keynote he just delivered. So if you have your questions, have them ready. You can share them inside of YouTube. If you're watching on Learn TV, you can share them on the interface that's on Learn TV. We've been capturing questions on Twitter as well. Make sure you include the hashtag AZOps so that we can actually capture those questions from you as well. We've been capturing from Reddit. Hello to everybody on Facebook. We're also streaming on there as well. If you have questions on there, we're monitoring it as well. Thomas, did you partake in a lot of the puzzles that we had on social that we were sharing out for the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I liked especially the one where there was a mistake in it.
Yes, I got called out numerous times, and it was funny. Was it a mistake? Was it a trick to make it a little bit more difficult to solve the puzzles because we didn't want the puzzle solved right away? Did you catch the Easter egg that was in the word search?
I haven't.
There was an Easter egg in the word search. You got to check that out. Isadora knows the answer to that one, and you probably just figured it out right now. How about we play a quick game right now? A quick game of Kahoot based on the keynote that we just saw from Mark Russinovich. This is a really cool game where it allows everybody who's watching to participate, and we can actually see the lead score in terms of, hey, were you paying attention? Can you answer the questions that we have out here? So what we're going to do now is we're going to go forward. We have 7 minutes to go. More than enough time to play this. So we'll get started. And I'll just get it running here. All right, so we're just waiting for players. So once you've gone to kahoot.it, you on your browser, on your mobile device, or on your computer, you enter in the game pin of 634247. There we go, and we got some players coming in.
Ooh, nice.
I love that. There's some familiar names and there's some new names that are coming in here. Oh, Pikachu's joined us. That's awesome. I like the Techosaurus Rex. That's a really cool one.
Nice. Yeah, let's hope a couple of people join.
Yeah,
I will try it on my phone in the meantime.
Ooh, that'd be interesting. Can you beat Thomas Maurer?
I'm sure you can.
All right. So we're going to get started. We have 6 minutes left. Let's get started. First question for ITOpsTalk, all things hybrid. 3, 2, 1. Here we go. All right, so it's a multi-select. Azure now spans an entire spectrum of services. Which services does it include? Azure Sphere, Azure Stack Hub and HCI, Azure IoT devices, Azure Edge, and private edge zones. Got 40 seconds on the clock.
Ooh, I think I managed.
Got 9, 10, 11 answers, 12 answers.
Oh my God, I'm probably wrong.
And that's why I'm not playing. I'm the host.
Now that was quick. It says.
Wow, that's really quick.
Oh wait, we're waiting for the timer. That's awesome.
Yep.
So people can still
answer. We got 30 answers, 31 answers. Last minute answers going in. 32. 2 seconds. Wow.
Ooh. Wow, I got this one correct. Surprise.
Let's go next one. Oh, we'll see who our leader is right now. Oh, Pikachu is currently leading. Look at that. Thomas, I'm guessing that's you on fourth place?
That looks like me, yes.
There you go. Let's go to the next question. Which solution allows on-premises architecture to take advantage of Azure capabilities such as monitoring and management? Is it Azure Sphere, Azure Stack, Azure Arc or Azure Active Directory?
No, I'm super competitive, by the way. I'm like,
I couldn't tell.
I only have time to like look now on the phone. I cannot moderate anymore. I just need to. But it is like, I just realized after the first question, it's obviously also on time. Like you need to be fast. Like the faster you answer, the better, obviously.
More points you get.
Ooh.
Quick answer, Azure Arc. Next up, let's see who's on the leaderboard. Oh, Thomas takes top lead. Let's see who, what, not by much. Yag is very close, followed by Techosaurus Rex. And Izjuik and Jens. Next up, true or false? Azure Stack, HCI, and Windows Server are the same offering. True or false?
I was still reading the question while I get on.
That's why I'm narrating it for you. 10 seconds.
So how is the chat going? I want to see some comments. Like someone should.
The chat's on fire. Simon Allison's like, this is why he has a second monitor and why it reminds him of college. So we got 23 people got it right as false. Let's see what the leaderboard looks like. Oh, Thomas is still on top, but Techosaurus Rex is climbing.
It's climbing up. Okay.
There we go. Next question, 4 of 6. Azure Arc for Kubernetes enables the ability to organize and govern across environments, enables the ability to run data services anywhere, offers at-scale app management, or none of the above. This is going to be a tricky one.
Yeah, that is a... No! I clicked on the wrong one.
Sure, you did.
Well, it's true. It should be...
Here's an opportunity to pass. Thomas.
Oh, damn it.
1 second. Here we go.
Yeah, I knew that this was going to happen.
Oh, Thomas falls down to 3rd place. Congratulations, Techosaurus Rex. I think we have one more question left. I think it's the toughest question of them all. Nope, 2 more left. Azure Sentinel can manage your security posture for both on-prem and in cloud. True or false?
Ooh. That was hard because we're not, like, it's not a hybrid event at all. So it's like, that was more a speed question, like where you actually...
Speed round. Hopefully you answer quickly enough so that you can go back up to 1st place because you're currently in 4th. Sam, no, that's not going to happen. All right. One person got it wrong. It's okay. We're all learning here. That's the whole point of this event, right? So Techosaurus Rex is on fire. He's currently 1st. Izjuik is 2nd. Thomas is 3rd. Pikachu is 4th. And Yag is 5th. Last question, and it's a tough one. Here we go. The color of Rick Claus's hat is green, tan, brown, or beige.
What is tan?
I think tan is another shade of brown.
Oh my God. If I have this wrong, I'll probably really get fired. Like, and I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure.
5 seconds.
It must be. It's also tricky with the colors are different. It's also like...
Ooh, 14 people got it right. And for the podium, for 3rd place, Izjuik.
Awesome.
Congratulations. 2nd place, Thomas Maurer. Number 1, I'm thinking it's Techosaurus. Techosaurus Rex. Congratulations, number 1. That's so awesome.
Great job. Great job. Awesome.
Wow, that was cool. That was my first Kahoot.
Nice. Me too. So with that, I think if you have questions, I think we need to hand it over. As Sarah said, we need to hand it over. She heard it in her ear. Me too, but I have nothing here. So if you have questions, please go out and ask questions for Mark. It's going to be awesome.
Hey, folks, thanks a lot there, Anthony and Thomas. It's been great having that Kahoots. I was actually in the game as your boss, and there was enough of a delay during the stream that prevented me from being able to actually rack up the real points. And so we'll have to talk about this later in our Connect one-on-one stuff. But without further ado, I just confirmed everything's all set to go. Mark Russinovich is joining us live. I do believe he's available now. Oh, yes, there we go. From a secret Azure bunker somewhere buried underneath the earth, we have Mark Russinovich, CTO and Technical Fellow of Microsoft Azure. Good to see you, my friend Mark. How are you doing today?
Good to see you, Rick. Doing good.
Again, thank you very much for taking the time out of your schedule to join us here for the live stream that we have going on for ITOpsTalks, all things hybrid. Great keynote that you delivered for some content regarding our hybrid strategies with Azure Stack, Azure Arc, and Azure Sentinel, and things like that. I've got a couple of questions that have come up during the delivery of the keynote. And also, just a reminder to everybody on the stream, if you wanted to ask questions, we do have people monitoring like Anthony and Thomas and others that you can pose in the particular stream that you're watching. They will surface up for me to be able to go off and answer here, but there's a couple of them that are up already. So Mark, I wanted to ask you.
Can I ask you a question? Is that hat really green?
So yes, it actually is a faded olive green. Typically,
okay.
It's a Tilly hat that is a T3 olive green style, in case you wanted to pick one up yourself. It's all set to go.
I don't know if I would have gotten that one right.
It's very, very true. Now, you mentioned at the very beginning about the range of devices that Azure is involved with and integrating with, and basically is part of that entire Azure family, ranging all the way down from the smallest of the IoT devices to even the very, very largest of data centers that we can kind of drop close by, close proximity to our customers and things like that. But I'm curious, because you've been involved, obviously, as the CTO of Azure with all this range of development of these different offerings, is there any particular like customer example of using some of these unique different things that are not what I would consider traditional Azure inside of a customer solution that you thought was kind of an interesting implementation of something hybrid that you could share with us?
Yeah, a couple. Well, I mean, one of the benefits of Azure Stack Hub is that you can run it in disconnected mode, like I mentioned. And we have Airbus Defense Systems, which has obviously very sensitive kinds of operations on their factory floor that they run Azure Stack Hub in a disconnected mode. Azure Stack Edge, that is an incredibly versatile device. And we see retail, for example, is one of the places where stores are becoming more intelligent with cameras and digital offers on the shelves. And so we've got, for example, Kroger, which is deploying those into stores. And that's obviously a hybrid solution, partially disconnected because the store needs to operate even if the internet connection's down. They also really care about the privacy of the data that they're collecting as customers are moving around the stores. They want to keep that on premises as well. So that Azure Stack Edge provides that capability. Of course, Sphere, which you said kind of in the middle, but Sphere mentioned coffee machines, and Starbucks has it deployed in their coffee machines so that they can get new recipes down to the machines and get telemetry off the machines to see how the quality of the brews are going securely to the cloud. So a whole bunch of scenarios, and I could go on and on.
I'm particularly enamored by the coffee machine capability with the Sentinel devices inside of it. Sorry, with the Sphere devices inside of it. That's actually really kind of cool for monitoring that kind of stuff. Now, along the lines of the data centers, I remember when you and I chatted back in the fall at Microsoft Ignite, we talked about our Natick data center because we had just taken that project up off of the floor and we're taking it apart and doing learnings and stuff like that. This was actually from Andrew McCallum on the chat, was asking, is there any possibilities for having like a lease to own program for customers to be able to have their own versions of Natick they could have inside of their data centers to be able to work with in some way, shape, or form?
Well, we're not far enough along to offer that with Natick. It's still a research project.
Right.
We have done deals with a certain number of customers where if they've got a data center asset that looks like it'll fit Azure data centers, that's something that will work with them if there's a large scale migration on taking over the data center. But as far as hardware that you can get and deploy in your own data center, the Azure Stack line of devices is what we've got currently.
Right.
Some point in the future, maybe there'll be a Natick that we let you drop in your lake near your office building. But
you got it. So now I'm curious though, because Natick actually was in use for research projects as it was being used and stuff like that. Are you aware Was it simply a matter of changing the region if you were authorized to be able to use it, to be able to interface with that type of a solution, even though it was still a prototype? Or was there more hoops and jumps that you had to go through in this case, it was Microsoft researchers that were using it?
Well, it was presented as a privately accessible cluster in Azure capacity. So you had to be whitelisted into getting access to it.
Mm-hmm. But after you were whitelisted, it was just as if you were provisioning stuff inside of a regular area inside of Azure to be able to use it.
Yep.
Very, very cool stuff.
Yeah, and the research that was going on in it, we talked about this as we were pulling it up. COVID-19 research is what we donated the capacity for.
All right. Are you familiar with the concept of using Lighthouse and Lighthouse technologies to be able to go off and to manage multiple Azure subscriptions, almost like an MSP?
Is that a rhetorical question?
No, just making sure, because I wanted to clarify for this question if it was appropriate or not.
Yeah.
This was actually brought up by someone that was watching Learn TV, because this concept of Lighthouse was actually quite cool. Are you able to go ahead and once you've set up Lighthouse and you're managing multiple subscriptions, are there any restrictions for using Azure Arc to be able to pull up that data, or does it just appear as another resource inside those subscriptions?
It appears as another resource, and I think that's one of the really powerful aspects of Lighthouse. And by the way, Lighthouse, or Azure Resource Manager projection, is something that I talked about, in my data center futures talks, I think going back like 3 years. When I talked about Azure managed apps, which we were at one point calling Azure appliances, based off of the same exact principle as Lighthouse, which is taking resources in one subscription and projecting them into another subscription, kind of like symbolic linking them. And once they're in the other subscription, then somebody can manage them, whether it's an ISV or an MSP. So, and when it comes to Azure Arc, those are resources that are in a customer subscription. They can project them the same way they can any other resources into an MSP's management.
Right. So basically, if it's a resource that's inside of Azure, you are able to go off into it to use it with that projection capability of Azure Lighthouse, which is awesome. Again, I'm sorry, I was using the code word tool for what that kind of thing is. I should use the proper one. There's another question that came in from Carl. I know this is something that you and I chatted about when we were originally talking about what type of content to bring into the hybrid discussion. And this is around containers, around Kubernetes and applications running on top of inside containers on top of Kubernetes. Are you aware of any interesting projects that you could possibly share, or an example of someone that's gone through and done the logistics of migrating an app from traditional on-premises VMs into a container environment, and maybe some of the gotchas that they might have had that they were able to work around?
Well, we see a ton of that type of migration. I think skipping, the lift and shift of just moving virtual machines, but lifting and shifting into containers. And it's not quite lift and shift, because there, of course, are changes to workflows and packaging of the application that has to happen in that process. But we've got a whole lot of customers. And one of the challenges when I get asked about customers is I'm not sure which ones are public and which ones aren't.
Right. You can abstract if you need to.
Yeah. Large airline, basically very aggressive migration to the cloud and wanting to, in the process, go cloud native and modernize, taking their on-premises Windows Server applications based on .NET, migrating them to .NET Core into containers on Kubernetes.
And the major roadblocks that they had, or the challenges that they had for being able to accomplish something like that? Are you aware of the details of something you could share?
Major challenges that they had. I don't think anything really jumps out. I mean, it's other than just, the blocking and tackling required to get familiar with Kubernetes and management of Kubernetes at scale, which I think that's the big learning that customers go through. I think the challenge once they get onto Kubernetes is that they want to develop cloud native applications, not just take their legacy applications and have them packaged up. And then that's when developers are faced with Kubernetes, and the enterprise ops team or IT team is faced with this. How do we make this accessible to developers? And that's where real challenges come into play, because Kubernetes has gotten pretty complex with all its sophistication, and developers, this is another tangent on cloud native development that we could go off into, but that's where challenges start to show up. Really hard challenges.
Mm-hmm. Just to shift gears a little bit away from containers and stuff, there was another question that came up specifically around the Sentinel. That was the third piece of what you talked about as the major chunks for hybrid solutions off of Azure with Sentinel. You had the Mimikatz example that you used in your demonstration, which was awesome. Are you aware of any kind of limitations or delays, or did you have to do any kind of demo trickery, if you will, to be able to get that kind of thing come up fast?
Major demo trickery. We had to basically, take several steps to disable standard policy that's built into Windows that has, Microsoft Defender has detections specifically for Mimikatz, plus LSASS with virtual secure mode will protect the credentials so Mimikatz can't get at them. So there's a bunch, and it was just kind of here's an example that is familiar to a lot of people in the IT space. Mimikatz has been around for a long time, I think over a decade now. So just something that everybody could kind of relate to.
And then from the actual notification on the demo side, when Sentinel actually picked it up, and then you demonstrated, here it is, it's visible, you can bookmark it, you can come back to it, the different types of notifications. That level of how fast the data comes up into Sentinel is relatively quick for notice and alerts.
Yeah, it's going to depend on what your data source is and what its upload frequency is, whether it's streaming it or whether it's bulk uploading it. But in general, if it's an Azure resource, it's going to end up there within a couple minutes.
We have another question just came in. Just again, reminder for folks that are watching the stream, you are welcome to use the appropriate chat interface on Facebook, YouTube, Learn TV, or whichever you're joining us from. This one came in. Thomas flagged this one here. The question comes off and basically says, first of all, love Azure Stack HCI. I'm pretty sure this isn't actually from Thomas himself. This is actually from a real human being. I know that you can run Azure SQL in my data center using Azure Arc-enabled data services. Can I also run it on top of an Azure Stack HCI environment as well?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what we're talking about with AKS on top of Azure Stack HCI, and then running the big data clusters on top of that. So perfect, layering of the Microsoft Arc offerings.
Right. Excellent. This is again a little bit about on the Arc side of things and how it ties into HCI. But I'm curious because as CTO, one of the things that you're involved with is also the planning side of what's coming in Azure, what we should put our development resources towards and stuff like that. Can you think back to when the particular program manager or the program team was coming up and presenting you with this is our vision for what we'd like to put into what is now called Azure Arc? What was kind of like the feel in the room? What was the environment like when that kind of discussion was going on about building this solution that gives us multi-cloud capable integration and monitoring?
Yeah, well, actually, I remember the meeting pretty well. It was just me and a person from the Azure Stack marketing team that had been working on this idea. And it was like, okay, we're ready to finally do this, because Azure Resource Manager, I was involved in the initial design of it. And the design was universal control plane that's very pluggable. In fact, one of my litmus tests for making sure that it was truly pluggable and not too tied to Azure's infrastructure was saying, can you take resources that are implemented outside of Azure in another cloud, for example, and have those represented through Azure Resource Manager? I look forward to the day when you could have VMs from other clouds show up in Azure Resource Manager. So when this marketing person came and sat down and said, hey, we're thinking of actually having this pluggable notion for on-premises resources into Azure so that you can get all those benefits of Azure Resource Manager, that was like, yes, fully on board, let's go.
It's like, tick this box, let's go ahead and move forward and make this a reality kind of thing. Yeah. That's great. An interesting question just came in also about the IoT world, kind of a jump back to our talk on the coffee environments with having different IoT devices that are in there. And this is an interesting pivot. Be interesting to see how potentially you ask this one here. You mentioned IoT as part of a hybrid cloud solution at this particular person's organization. The IoT side has been mostly developer focused, and the IT team and I have not really been involved with that much as well at this point in time. What do you see the system admin's role, the operations role in IoT and in the hybrid cloud?
Well, yeah, this is a great point, because the two worlds have been largely distinct up to this point, and IoT solutions have been largely very custom and one-off, and so they're really developer focused. And you have kind of lacked the management tools that are have been available to IT for so many years, which is one of the reasons we've got IoT security challenges with legacy devices and systems. I think that what you're seeing now is this unification, like I mentioned, across the spectrum of devices with common substrates for cloud native development, as well as common runtime services across them. And then on top of that, the management capabilities you get with something like Azure Resource Manager and the infrastructure layer, which would be Kubernetes underneath, down to the runtimes, which provide you a subset of those services. Like I said, I think one of the things that we strive for is this continuity across that spectrum, where the only difference between points on the spectrum are the capabilities of this device. So you might have to take a very small subset of the kinds of services and capabilities, leverage those down on the smaller devices like Sphere, extremely constrained device. So you're going to have a very small subset. But ideally, you're able to program it the same way. You're able to talk to cloud resources the same way on a Sphere as you can on an Azure Stack Edge or Azure Stack Hub. It's just richer set of capabilities and more resources for the app to consume and use on those. So that's so I think that from an ops perspective, the ops will be taking over that infrastructure that has traditionally been the IoT development infrastructure.
And obviously with Azure policy, applying policies down to them, making sure that things are across the board being secured and managed and that sort of stuff. So it makes natural space, there's a natural sense for that space to start to converge together. Now, we mentioned this spectrum of different things that were going on in the IoT space and how that was working. I'm going to bring you back for the view that you had on the slide talking about Windows Server and Azure Stack HCI and that sort of stuff. Wondering if you could, because again, you're well versed down this kind of level. Is there a lot of fundamental differences between where Azure Stack HCI sits and kind of its architectural layers for like virtualization, this example? Is it all that different than what we're doing on just a straight server virtualization hypervisor level, or is it higher up that kind of separation of tasks take place between those two different operating systems?
Well, if you take a look at Azure Stack HCI or just a virtualized Windows Server system, of course, they've got Hyper-V common at the bottom, but Azure Stack HCI has many layers of software capability that you won't find in a standalone server. Things like the software-defined data center capabilities you've got, like software-defined networking and software-defined storage, and the management capabilities that are built into it. Whereas Windows Server is focused on single box, Azure Stack HCI is focused on managing infrastructure at some larger scale. So that I think that Windows Server is a small subset of what you see in Azure Stack HCI.
And from what I understand, the idea as well is you've got newer innovations coming in that are closely tied to the Azure side of things coming in Azure Stack HCI for obvious reasons. Management plane being the Windows Admin Center interface to be able to go off and to manage it versus the Windows Server side, which is still hybrid capable and able to be connected, but much more different solutions that fit inside of that one.
Exactly.
Yep. How about the integration from third parties when we start talking about Windows Sentinel side of things for being able to do stuff? In your demo, you very quickly kind of laid over and showed that there were the ability to go in and to import these information data points into your security lake of data. Is there any plans for being able to continue to expand those as they go? Any kind of hiccups or gotchas you have to worry about for your existing data sets to bring into Sentinel? Or is it just basically open provided you adhere to certain standards?
It's open. And I think that's one of the goals from the start. And it generally, if you take a look, this is just a theme across Microsoft's services where we want to leverage the power of the ecosystem, ISV ecosystem and developer ecosystem to bring their own solutions. So it's very open. And so the more that, if there's anything missing, we want to make sure that it's addressed if somebody wants it connected to Sentinel.
Mm-hmm. Awesome stuff. Now we got just a couple of minutes left, about 3-4 minutes left. So again, if you have a last minute question you want to ask us, we still have time for one or two more. Now I do have to go on the personal side here for just a minute, just because everyone's looking at your back of your office and that sort of stuff. And there is a question or confirmation over your left shoulder. Is that actually a bust of a particular evil empire person that's on that side, just to confirm, because it's a little bit obscured.
Yeah.
Very nice. It is. Very, very nice. Thank you very much for sharing that one there. The part of my team has been doing an awful lot of work on the automation side and working with obviously Azure resources and ARM templates and that sort of stuff. And there's been a new development that I'm sure you've been involved with in the CTO office or involved with the planning side of things, with working with Bicep as the internal name for what that particular project is. What are your thoughts on why it's come about that we've developed it, and where do you see it heading in the future?
Yeah, so
and
that's
if you could explain what Bicep is, sorry, for those that don't know.
So Bicep is a domain-specific language for deployment, resource deployment, and description, declarative DSL. And I think the declarative part is very relevant here. So the way that it came about is ARM templates, for anybody that's worked with them, while they're extremely powerful, they're also can get extremely complicated, and they're extremely verbose. They're both verbose because of the JSON syntax. They're also verbose just because of the ARM schema and what it asks you to put into the template. So seeing so many customers struggle with developing Azure Resource Manager templates or understand how to, when they pulled one from the GitHub, for example, gallery of templates, and wanted to customize it, just understanding how to do that, we wanted to lower the barrier. And we had lots of customers coming and saying, JSON, this ARM JSON schema, very hard to work with. So we did a bunch of things, like we had Visual Studio Code extension that understands ARM templates and does IntelliSense and autocomplete, which lower the bar, make it easier. But we thought, hey, maybe we could take a step function here on making it easier. How about making it more like a programming language instead of this declarative JSON schema? And so thus the Bicep idea was born. And it was actually with lots of interviews. So at on-premises Ignite, at Build, and virtually, we'd have roundtables with customers to talk about, and surveys with customers where we'd ask them, what are the challenges that you've got with ARM templates? What would you like to see in a DSL? Would you like, what if the DSL was Python based? What if it was JavaScript based? So we explored a whole bunch of things. And what we came to, the conclusion we came to is that if we picked an off-the-shelf programming language but wanted it to be modified it to be a DSL, that would actually probably cause more problems. And trying to shoehorn declarative ARM notions into an existing rich programming language that people were familiar with for imperative program, kind of general purpose programming, we thought was awkward. So we decided, let's just go, embrace this wholeheartedly, that we're going to build a DSL. And so we started to sketch out the DSL. We brought in Anders Heilsberg as a consultant on it. So he's kind of been providing input through the whole process of developing the DSL, and also floated the early versions past customers, and they loved it. It's extremely expressive, yet 100%, and you're going to see, I'm going to actually talk about it again in Ignite and show you an update there, 100% compatible with ARM. So you can, it's ready for production, the version that we've got coming out for you to use, and with 100% compatibility, take and describe and Bicep your Azure Resource Manager deployments, and have that go basically as JSON as the assembly language for ARM at that point. So extremely excited by it. I think that it's going to raise the bar dramatically on people's ability to go manage their Azure deployments, including their Arc deployments.
Right. And again, anything that's going to make deployment of resources on Azure better is going to be an awesome thing to be able to go off and invest in from a scaling perspective. That actually ties us into our last question before we have to wrap up. It's just, in your closing thoughts, where do you see the career of Windows Server admins that are currently right now watching this right now? Where would you recommend for them to go off and to focus and to expand their existing knowledge base?
I think the answer to that is the same answer that I gave probably, 11 years ago when I started. That question came up right back even then. It's like, okay, cloud is coming. What do Windows Server admins do? And I think that it's Windows Server admins become cloud admins, and you learn about hybrid topologies. You learn about security. Network security is extremely important, but you focus also on up-leveling and creating a substrate for developers to deploy to, and providing these landing zones. I think there's a common term that people are using for this, making it so that your development groups when they deploy securely with compliance and with cost management in place, and the network is set up for them. And in fact, we've been driving Azure in this way to fully support the landing zone concept kind of natively, so you can stand up policies and kind of infrastructure that makes it so that developers can just go deploy and they get the right support underneath the platform for them without them having to go set it up, for example.
Right. Now,
So anyway, that is kind of, I think, where the next step would be in a career evolution is focusing on managing that substrate.
Mm-hmm. Managing the substrate, understand the differences, and also transferring a lot of the skills they currently have that are directly applicable inside the Azure space too, with networking concepts and security concepts and policies and operation stuff and stuff like that.
Exactly.
But all that sort of stuff is absolutely perfect. Again, I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you very much for joining us now. We're going to be chatting again in the afternoon/evening as well for our other audience. And so stay tuned for that one there. Thank you very much, Mark. It's great. I'm going to hand this back over to Sarah and Pumala to close this out.
All right. Thanks for the opportunity to give the keynote, and great conversation. See you a little bit later.
You got it.
Hello. That was so much fun. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Rick, as well, for doing the quiz master there. It's been super exciting to see so much happen today. We've been live for nearly an hour, I think it is. But yeah, we're loving the chat from everybody in the community. Please do participate in our Discord server. Pumla, can you remember the link? Because I've completely forgotten it.
I've been practicing the link, aka.ms/ITOpsTalk-Discord.
Yep. So yeah, we'll be having all the conversation there as well. And all of our sessions are about to drop. So it's nearly 5 p.m. here in the UK. So they'll be dropping live at 5 p.m. What time will it be for people in the Eastern time zone, Pumla?
5.
It's like 5 minutes time, 3 minutes
Yeah,
time.
like 12. 12.
Yeah.
12 p.m. Eastern time. Gosh, time zones are rough right now.
Absolutely. So yeah, all the sessions will be going live. You can check out blog posts about them on the link on screen, and the Discord server is also on screen as well. So that's where we'll all be in a few minutes. So make sure you're tuning into those sessions and hanging out in the Discord server. It's been really fun chatting to everybody. Thank you to everybody that's been here. Also, thank you to everybody that's been helping us run all of this in the background. It's been a fun afternoon, evening, morning, wherever we are. Yeah. What else have I missed, Pumla? What should we be closing with and saying?
Pretty much continue to join us, talk to us, comments, concerns, questions. We've got our Discord server. We've got Twitter. So if you love the sessions, let us know. If you don't love the sessions, we want to know. And like Rick had said, we're going to be back on later for our Western time zone friends. So, if you're awake, join that time as well, because I'm sure we'll have different questions for Mark and Rick to answer.
Yeah, it's been awesome fun. So yeah, like Pumla said, this is the first time we've ever ran this event, so we're looking for feedback on the good things that we've done, even the bad things we can improve. We hope to do more of these events if you've enjoyed them. So yeah, all the feedback that you can, please do give us. We love to interact with the community. So yeah, all the sessions are kind of going live in a few minutes. So
2 minutes, I think, according to my clock, it's 2 minutes. But
yes. Absolutely. So thank you, everybody. And we'll
you.
see you all over at the sessions.